What's up, Front Yard family? Jay here with my friend Alex Caruso from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast and Football Guys. And today we're going to be talking about the fantasy outlook for DeAndre Swift in 2022.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here, Jay. I appreciate you having me, and I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite players, both in real life and fantasy football, in DeAndre Swift. You can see the jersey behind me over my shoulder. I'm pointing the wrong way, obviously, because we're on StreamYard, but I'm excited to talk about some Swift today.
I love it, man. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. What are some of the positives that you like for Swift in this upcoming season?
Yeah, so the biggest reason that I'm in love with DeAndre Swift this season comes down to these two stats right here. Number one, as a rookie, he had the fourth highest fantasy points per touch of all time. The three players to finish higher were David Johnson, Christian McCaffrey, and Alvin Kamara. Notice how all three of those guys later finished as the running back one overall in all of fantasy football. Also, before he was drafted, Swift had a 6.7 or higher, running back grade from Lance Zierlein, who's considered one of the best running back rankers out there. The other six guys to get the 6.7 or higher grade all finished as a top six running back in fantasy football at some point, and all of them did it by their third season. Swift is the only one not to do it. So by that point already, Swift is already a historical outlier if he does not have a really good season. He was a top five running back last year before getting hurt. He was second in yards created per touch. He was 12th in weighted opportunities, which is carries plus targets, but targets are worth more in PPR leagues. He also was tied for the most targets per game in the NFL. He was 8th in fantasy points per game. He was 8th in snap share, even though it seemed like Jamal Williams was always in the field. So I think that Swift is set for success, and as long as he can stay healthy and improve with an improving offensive line that's also going to be staying in place, this offense should be better with Dan Campbell. I think all signs are pointing up for Swift this year.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think he's one of a handful of guys that are in true contention to finish as the RB1 if he's able to stay healthy and stay on the field. Through week 11 last season, he was RB5 on the season in PPR leagues. 78 targets, 62 receptions, 452 yards, receiving yards, and that's just in 13 games. Fourth most receptions, fifth most reception yards, and the fourth highest target share for running backs with 13.9. Like you said, he's got one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL with Sewell, with Frank Ragnow, and the rest of the guys that they have over there. The sky's the limit for DeAndre Swift if he's able to stay on the field. I'm with you 100%. Now, we do have to go over some of the negatives, whether there's a lot or a little, but what are some of the things that you could see being a hindrance for his production in this upcoming season?
Yeah, well, for one, we haven't really seen a good Lions back produce in fantasy since Barry Sanders, which is in the 90s. So it's been a long time, just historically, since they had someone produce. And yeah, they had a couple guys that had some okay numbers, but they truly haven't had someone really finish really high in fantasy in a very long time. So that's a concern for one. Two, it's also still the Lions. This team is one of the worst offenses in football year in and year out. I think, if anything, the signs are finally pointing up for them. But again, it's still the Lions. It's one of these teams every year that seems to let us down, even when there's hopes. That's obviously a concern. But I know the other part that people were concerned about was Swift running in between the tackles. And that last year, statistically, Jamal Williams was a lot better between the tackles than he was. I know there's people that say, Swift only produced because of garbage time last year. But I think there definitely are some concerns with what this offense could be, the Lions franchise overall, and maybe his ability to play well through it in between the tackles and whatnot. So Those are some of the negatives, but I think a lot of the positives outweigh the negatives overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to that, you have to take into consideration health. He's missed 8 games over his first 2 seasons. And like you said, the offense that he plays on, Detroit was 25th in scoring, 22nd overall in total yards. And Jared Goff is still the quarterback of this team. While I do think Jared Goff does get a little bit too much hate from an NFL and fantasy perspective, they did sign DJ Chark. They drafted Jameson Williams. Amon-Ra St. Brown really turned it on at the end of the season. You got Hawkinson. So one of the biggest points of DeAndre Swift's value is his receiving ability. What if Goff does decide to target DJ Chark or Jameson Williams a little more, or, the stretch that Amon-Ra St. Brown really, was a league winner for a lot of people at the end of last year, that lit a connection between the two, and some of the receptions drop off. While I don't think that's necessarily the case, it is in the realm of possibility. So it's just something you kind of have to, have in the back of your head.
Yep, exactly.
Next thing we'll go ahead and do is the name game. And basically what that is going to be is I've got 5 players who are currently being drafted around the ADP of DeAndre Swift according to 4for4, DeAndre Swift is the RB8 off the board. We'll just go ahead and get into it. Alex, if you are on the clock and Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Swift is on the board, who are you taking?
Ooh, I'm going to take Dalvin Cook. I know he has not played over 14 games in a season, but I really like the new head coach in Kevin O'Connell. I like what that offense is going to be. So for that reason, I'm going to take Cook. I think he's going to see an increase in targets, an increase in touchdowns over last year. I think he had some bad touchdown luck, so I'm going to go with Cook.
Yeah, this is a really tough one because, like, I'm with you. I love DeAndre Swift, but give me Cook in this situation. I think he's got the same ceiling and a little bit of a safer floor. This next one, next one up is going to be Najee Harris or DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I'm going to go Najee Harris here. I mean, over the last 20 years, every single running back to have 350 or more touches, has finished as a top 10 running back in fantasy football. Najee Harris is as safe as it gets, and I think that he's someone that has a lot of upside that should only improve going into his second year. So as long as he had 381 touches last year, so he could drop 30 touches, and he still is basically going to automatically be in the top 10, as long as he produces. He's still extremely talented. He's still only going to get better going into year two. So just because the volume is 100,000% going to be there, I'm going to take Najee here.
Volume is king in fantasy football, and I'm with you. That's why I'm going to go Najee over Swift. Yeah. This is another tough one for me, at least. Joe Mixon or Swift?
I'm going to go Swift here. I think it's purely off the fact that Zach Taylor said that Mixon really isn't going to be playing third downs. They're trying to preserve his body. They'd rather have, whether it's Samaje Perine or Chris Evans in on third down. It's going to be one of those guys. Mixon only played 26 third down snaps last year. If you'd rather take Mixon, go ahead. He's probably going to score more touchdowns than Swift, but I'd rather rely a little bit more on the touches and the pass catching than I would hoping that, Joe Mixon gets another high volume of touchdowns like last year. So I'm going to take Swift because I prefer to chase more of the targets than anything.
That's completely fair, 100%. And I love Swift, but I am going to go Joe Mixon. And the tiebreaker for me is the offense. I love the Bengals offense. It's a lot safer. Swift, like you said, is probably going to have you almost guaranteed more production through the air, but I just like the offense a little better, and that's what it's going to be for me.
Yeah, I have those guys back to back right now in my rankings. I might have Mixon higher right now, and I think I'd take it tomorrow. I might wake up and want to take Mixon.
I was going to say you ask me a few days, and I might take Swift. So that's right where the line is for me, where it's like a real conversation. Next one up is somebody who is a fantasy darling in this offseason so far: Aaron Jones or DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Swift here just because he has less competition. I'm a little scared of A.J. Dillon. I'm sure a lot of us saw that video of A.J. Dillon just absolutely massacring.
That was fantastic.
In a baseball game.
That guy was popped off and everything. I hope the kids didn't see that. Like, it ruined the illusion of the mascot.
Seriously. But he looks ready to go. And I think that, Aaron Jones, historically, in the 8 games that Devontae Adams has been really, really good when Adams hasn't been playing. But I think I'm going to have to take Swift here because I think that, I don't have to worry as much about the competition of someone like A.J. Dillon pushing him for touches. I think Aaron Jones is still going to be great, but I'm going to lean Swift here.
Yep, I'm with you, and I feel like Aaron Jones has slightly safer floor, but the ceiling is much higher for Swift. Yep. So give me the guy with the higher ceiling in this situation. And last but not least, we'll go with Uncle Lenny Fournette or DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, I'm going to go Swift here once again. I mean, Leonard Fournette's missed at least 3 games in 4 of his 5 seasons so far. I think if I have that correctly. I really love Rachaad White in this offense, what he's going to be. I don't think Leonard Fournette's role is going anywhere. I think he's going to be there, but I think I'm going to lean the younger guy that has a little bit more upside to improve, where if anything that Fournette would only be on the downside. But Fournette was still the running back 3 in points per game last year behind only Eckler and Jonathan Taylor. So if you'd rather Fournette or you'd rather Aaron Jones or Mixon or whoever, that's fine. I'm personally just going to lean Swift here. I like the touches. I like the pass catching upside, even though they tied for the league lead in targets last year, but I'm going to lean Swift here, just barely. Again, I think I have it going Mixon and then Swift and then Fournette right now in my rankings. But again, talk to me 3 days from now and my rankings might change. Yeah,
and I'm glad you brought up Rachaad White because I'm a big fan of him as well and his pass catching prowess. I really think they drafted him for that reason, to bring him in for that role, maybe to try to take some of the load off of Lenny and try to keep him healthy for the long run. So I'm with it. And like you said, just because we're picking one or the other, especially this grouping of guys, they're all in the same grouping of, not necessarily the high-end Jonathan Taylors and CMCs. All these guys are going to likely have top 10 seasons. It's just at this point you're splitting hairs, and it's a very real scenario where you could be on the clock and any of these guys are available. So with this one as well, I'm going to go Swift. Again, ask me in a few days, and that might be different for at least right now. I like Swift in this situation.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be it for the fantasy outlook of DeAndre Swift for 2022. Make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube. We're going to have a lot more of these coming out as the season continues to creep closer.